Number 10. Paint ration. Here's another story for you. It might seem kind of silly, but growing up, I got to witness the birth of a mainstream sport. The UFC got its start in the early 90s, but blew up in the mid-2000s. Now, I'm not much of a sports guy. Besides major championship matches or games, I don't really watch any sports. I'm more of a film and video game guy, if you couldn't tell. However, my first interaction with the UFC was seeing an octagon-shaped ring, and my grade 2 geometry immediately kicked in and said, That's an octagon. Wow, okay, that's different. However, the second thing that I noticed is that this was not wrestling, and this wasn't boxing. It was kind of a mixture of both. Sort of a mixed martial art, if you will. Well, that's kind of what paint ration was. There was no indirect punching or kicking, but pretty much anything else goes. To me, this sounds like a good way to get injured. Kind of like wrestling before, now it's just even worse. And as I'm sure you all know, paper cuts can be lethal back then, so maybe not such a good idea. Did I mention this is done without clothes too? Everyone's naked. Number 9. The road trip. This isn't an Olympic event, but honestly, it should have been. Think about it for a minute. I want you guys to look out the nearest window right now. Get up, go ahead, look out the nearest window. Tell me what you see. You probably see a road with cars. When you need a fast food fix, it's as simple as getting in a car and driving on the road to your destination. Or getting it delivered with your favorite food delivery app. It's 2022, we can do a lot of crazy stuff now. What I'm getting at is that people from all over the Greek city-states came to Olympia to witness the first Olympics. Except, you know, it would have been a triathlon just to get there. Frankly, my biggest fear, walking. That was the main mode of transportation, which after a while in those sandals was probably hell. Imagine trekking many, many miles by land and sea to only be exhausted to watch athletes become exhausted. Oh, I need some water just thinking about it. Woo. Number 8. Hotel speed. Okay, picture this. You're young and in a hotel with your parents. Maybe it's a vacation, maybe it's a trip, or maybe it's a hockey game. Nice. Nonetheless, you find yourself in a long hallway with a strange looking carpet. Hotel hallways always have weird carpets, I don't know. Maybe it's the giant hamburger and milkshake you just ate. Maybe it's the hotel TV, or the excitement of just not being at home. But something has changed. You're different. Your powers have been amplified. For this corridor will be your personal racetrack. A shame Guinness World Records isn't here to clock you in at max speed, because for some reason if you fly down that hallway any faster, the rug would catch fire. Yes, the joys of running down a hotel hallway. This is probably how the first Olympians felt at the first Olympic Games. I'm comparing it to that for some reason, sure we'll go with it. Where the only event at these Olympic Games was running. Like many of the other events that would later come later on, this was done without clothing, which is fine. As long as you're, not doing that in the hotel hallway. Keep clothes on. Number 7. WWE, brother. Only if you could have seen the look on my face when I discovered that wrestling in the WWE isn't as real as I thought it was. The shock, the confusion, and the loud ringing in my ear. It was pretty serious for me. I got really into it as a kid. Gave me some Vietnam flashbacks, seriously. You mean to tell me that there was an intricate planning into every hidden fall, every entrance, and every time we heard the sound of a steel chair connecting with someone's forehead? Oh man. As a kid, I never would have guessed that, but when The Undertaker walks in a room, you take notice. Those thoughts just go away. Sadly, the ancient Greeks did not have cage matches, turnbuckles, or personas based on hyper male confidence. What they did have, however, was some real wrestling, some bare knuckle, no clothes, oiled up kind of wrestling. Nice. Instead of a one leg up pin, a scoring system was used for when the opponent's body was on the ground. And I'm sure lots of people got injured in the process. No thanks. I'll stick to the cage matches. Number 6. Peace. Peace. What's better than a good war? A better armistice, or at least I'd like to hope so. During these first Olympic Games, which on a side note, if I had a time machine and a scooter, I'd love to see firsthand. There was people and athletes coming from all corners of Hellenistic civilization, all Greek states and colonies. Well, sometimes these Greek states got caught up in these little things called wars. Who knew, right? But when the Olympics were on, a truce was called. Messengers were dispatched to announce the truce, which gave all the people traveling on their long treks safe passage. I also find it somewhat amusing that they did this all for one day. That's right, the events only lasted one day. Some folks did days of traveling only to have it all be over in 24 hours. The opening ceremony couldn't have taken that long either, so I feel like it's kind of a waste of time. Only if we got some of that peace right now. Russia is looking at Ukraine a certain kind of way, just waiting to act up. Bad Russia. Stay in your corner. Number 5. Tanks. Okay, so after a few Olympics, people got tired of walking those many miles just to see some dudes run a mile. We need more events, said the Olympic organizers, but what? We have athletes running, what else is there? Okay, I hear you. What if we get athletes to run, but with full military armor and gear on? Yeah, that's right. There was another race where athletes would wield the armor of the Greek soldiers and race. I can imagine that there was a clunking noise, or at least a lot of it, and also how difficult it must be to run in bronze armor. I'm gonna let you guys in on a little secret. Come a little closer. A little closer. A little closer. Whoa, too close. Bronze armor isn't good for chafing. Cause let me tell you something, hot Mediterranean sun, not a lot of water, and running in hot metal attire? Someone's gonna have to come over and put baby powder on my bum bum. Number 4, the classic. I don't know why, but when I think of ancient Greeks, I think of grapes on the vine, marble, chariots, and the movie 300. It's kind of hard to forget those spray-on abs. Although someone could put them on me, it'd be kind of nice. Equestrian events were another event of the ancient Greek Olympics, and I have something nice to say about something for once. While every other event was dominated by males because, well, only males were allowed to compete of course, the equestrian events allowed women. Nice! And naturally, ladies, when someone points the spotlight on you, you shine. A notable winner of the event was Cynicica, a Spartan princess and athlete who was an excellent horse breeder. I guess that's a nice thing to be remembered by. According to some records, 2 monuments were built in honor of her victory. I rode a horse once. I can firmly say that I prefer the automobile. Just saying. You walk around like that, that's why all the cowboys walk like this. You just do that all that. Number 3, the long jump. After running in armor, it was discovered that jumping makes for a great Olympic event. How high? How far? It's simple, really. It should come as no surprise that I did not perform well in that section of track and field day at school. To my disadvantage, there was no strength-based events because it was considered unhealthy for us because we were so young. Yeah, I wasn't sure about that. My counter to that argument would be, why are you making tubby kids run the 1500 meter? That's liable to have the kid with asthma writing his math test in the hospital bed later. I'd probably be joining him. However, I am a supporter of the ancient Greek jumping event. Basically, athletes gotta jump as far as they can whilst holding 2 large rocks. Now, if we did that today, people would know what it's like to do a long jump when grandma feeds you too much. Yeah, it's not easy. Number 2, the discus, the javelin, and the hammer. Sounds like a good band. Hey, these are all events that we still compete in today. That's awesome, but doesn't it make you nervous when the athletes are throwing those bad boys around? Especially the hammer throw. God, it just makes me so nervous. While I couldn't find an exact example of an accident happening, I doubt the ancient Greeks had safety in mind for spectators. The discus was made from stone or bronze, and they were tossing those suckers the same way Guy Fieri tosses Caesar salad. Which is a lot because he's kind of a big guy too. However, for me, it's the javelin that's most terrifying, as that was an appropriate weapon of war for the time, and athletes are just throwing them around like it's nothing. You're telling me the crowd was a safe distance away from the splash zone? Yeah, just keep your eye in the sky to be safe, folks. I don't know about that. Number 1, rap battle. Honestly, this is something we should bring back to the Olympics. While I was complaining about not being able to compete in strength-based events earlier, I, as a theater kid, would have much preferred some of the other less intensive events the ancient Greeks had up to offer. The ancient Greeks were not just chucking stones and chafing in bronze armor. There was also a competition with the arts. Poetry, song, and singing. Imagine if America entered Eminem into a rap battle contest. There would be no contest. Imagine if Canada entered one for musicians. K.D. Lang, Celine Dion, and Anne Murray, just singing angels.
Number 10, Decemviri, the law of 12 tables. Well, actually the word means 10. 10 men, actually. Those special 10 would be the appointed men who would consider themselves the first ever lawmakers. The earliest attempts to create a code of law was the law of 12 tables. A commission of 10 men, are also known as the Decemviri, was appointed 455 BC to draw up a code of law-binding rules on both patrician and plebeian, which would be strictly enforced. Some of these laws included simple laws like, you don't break your word. If the army or king calls on you, you gotta go. And of course, if you hit or hurt someone, you get hit or hurt back. And you owe us some money. This system was the first in its place, holding people responsible for the things that they did and said in Rome. Strategic, fundamental, and important laws like, hey, no crying at funerals, alright? You burn my corn, I'm gonna burn your corn, and I get to burn you. And yeah, no meetings at night. It's dark. Okay, so they missed their mark on a couple of them, but a couple of those laws still stuck around.
Number 9. Field surgery. The Romans were fierce on the battlefield, but they were also extremely handy. Who would have thought? This was the first time in history where quick surgeries were performed on the battlefield under the leadership of Augustus. Not Augustus Mayhew, it's a different Augustus, but he's also really helpful, like one time a year. Ancient Roman medics invented hemostatic tourniquets and surgical clamps. Yeah, guy invented clamps. Imagine that on a resume. Roman field doctors would also perform physicals on new warriors. Yeah, they would also combat the spread of disease. Although they were going to war and were constantly being patched up, the Roman military would often live longer than the average folk, because these military men were constantly being disinfected. They were checking their camps all day. Masks are hard in 2020, but the Romans were disinfecting the Coliseum. Nice, we'll get there one day. Maybe.
Number 8, the name Rome. We kinda got into this a little bit about those brothers Remus and Romulus. This barbaric history is loose and from many sources, so I'm gonna kinda sum it up into broad statements. Two brothers, didn't like each other, kept fighting, raised by a wolf and a bird. That's pretty much it. We have seen what these two have looked like. Every statue and painting of these two is always like one of them stone cold Steve Austining the other one. One built a wall and the other mocked him and jumped over that wall, and then there was only one. I feel like I made a sandcastle once and Taylor stepped on it, and I can absolutely see how the city was formed. Flawless victory. Yeah, that sounds like brotherly love to me. Rome deriving from its name Romulus, the victor in this legendary sibling quarrel, giving the city its official name. Hey, you got the god of war as your dad, and the mother of all gods and goddesses as your mom? There's gonna be some feeling of purpose just lingering around. Guess I could just like make a wall. And with a couple drywall holes later, with the death and defeat of his brother Remus, Romulus claimed his position as king and named the city after himself. Selfish much? He ain't heavy, baby. He's my brother.
Number 7. Daily acts. In a time before Twitter or Facebook, how else do we get our fake news, right? How do we share our aunt's nonsense? How do we do it? 131 BC, this marked the first time a newspaper was ever used. Well, they're referred to as daily acts at this point, or acta diurna. The saying, written in stone, couldn't have been more historically accurate in this case. See these texts containing information on military or civil issues, death notices, gladiatorial events, you name it. These were commonly written on metal or stone. Your morning news etched into a stone. Imagine the crossword section in 131 BC. Hey honey, who's the neighbor in Simpsons? Flanders, nice, that's it. Ping, ping, is that an F? Ping. It took time and effort. It was exhausting just to get one notice out to the public. So you best take these notes seriously, okay? Imagine YouTube comments written in stone. Took a guy 6 business days to write it, so he meant it.
Number 6, Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar was a Roman general and statesman, a member of the first triumvirate. Caesar led the Roman armies in the Gallic Wars, which, well, we've seen and heard about these battles that Julius Caesar led. It's the organized outfit of shiny metal and red, moving slowly and swiftly through the Gauls like a man-made tank before defeating his political rival Pompey the Great, another military leader, and also the husband of Caesar's daughter Julia. Okay, there it is, yeah. That's why he became his nemesis. Political differences. Yeah. Due to these ongoing internal civil wars between the two leaders, Julius Caesar eventually killed Pompey in battle and became dictator of Rome. This was until his assassination in 44 BC. Oh, mighty Caesar, dost thou lie so low? Are all thy conquests, glories, triumphs, spoils shrunk to this little measure? Fairly well. Antony, Act 3, Scene 1. Hey man, eye for an eye. You read the rules. He played a crucial role in the events that led to the Roman Empire and remains one of the brightest and bravest military leaders the world has ever seen. His story can be seen and heard top to tail in William Shakespeare's play simply titled Julius Caesar.
Number 5, basket of bees. Guess what this one is? It's pretty much, that's exactly what it is. It's horrible. We often look at ancient Rome as the birthplace for numerals, modern plumbing, social life, all that good stuff. Don't get it twisted, ancient Rome had a lot in common with the Dark Ages as well, okay? The punishments that they would inflict on others, horribly creative, I'll say that. Like for example, a basket of bees. A basket of bees, there we go. Maybe wasps, who knows, I don't know, history gets all crazy, you know? This punishment saw the victim placed in a large woven basket, naked, might I add. Then the basket was hoisted up near a beehive, of course, and then Romans would just anger the hive. They would just shake the basket. And then in turn, all these bees would sting said victim to death. This was meant to be a long and painful death, but eventually, this is how humans realized folks were allergic to bees, because they would meet their demise a little too fast, you know? Romans would be like, what happened? What's going on? Are we going home now? That's it?
Number 4, the Coliseum. They say Rome wasn't built in a day, right? Right? No, I'm asking you, I don't know, that's a saying, I think I've heard that somewhere. The word Coliseum is a Latin noun formed from the word colossus, meaning gigantic. And it's huge! It once held more than 50,000 people at one time or another. That's literally the Yankee Stadium. This oval stadium was built from cement, limestone, and volcanic rock. Yeah, that thing ain't going anywhere. Historians and archaeologists are still discovering and unearthing secrets of this site. In fact, most of Rome still hasn't even been dug up yet. What? That's right. In fact, only about a tenth lays discovered, with the other 90% still somewhere around 30 feet below street level. Who knows how many wonders of the world lay unearthed. The Coliseum, also known as the seventh wonder of the world, lays megalithic, 615 feet above the ground at the center or heart of the city. It is the largest ancient amphitheater ever built, and it is still the largest standing amphitheater in the world today despite its age. Its use for the last 1,000 years were rampant with events, festivals, and would even flood its center to reenact naval wars with real ships. How did they get those things in there? I bet that's how they made the bottle and the ship thing, just kinda. And all that water? Just a guy with a giant hose? Yeah, go ahead, turn it on. Yeah, we're gonna be here a while, guys. We gotta push the play.
Number 3, boot and rally. The Urban Dictionary added the old boot and rally back in 2002, but Romans, back in the ancient day, they were way ahead of us. Romans knew how to get down, and they also knew how to get it back up. Yeah, ancient Romans would boot and rally in order to continue eating and drinking. What would normally be a red flag at any house party or event was a sign of respect back then. These banquets, these were social events, okay? They were nothing like Tyler's toga party last Halloween. It's not the same at all. Same amount of puke, not the same theme. Attending these parties was a sign of social standing, so you wanted to be around the longest. You wanted to drink the most, dance the most, converse the most, and also, yeah, puke the most. No playing around in Rome, okay? I wouldn't last 2 hours at one of these. Kyle knows what's up, he's seen it. I bring Tums to the bar now, you know what I mean? I'm always prepared. The solution in ancient Rome was actually quite simple, long before Tums. See, what you would do is you would excuse yourself from dinner, go across the hall to the vomitorium, then you would grab a feather, any feather you like, and then you would just go, and then put it back, and then go right back to dinner. Then enjoy more lobster, because, hey, now you made room.
Number 2, Gladiators. If you've seen the blockbuster hit Gladiator with Russell Crowe, my name is Maximus Decimus Meridius, then you absolutely nailed it, because that's pretty well it. A stew of slaves, lawbreakers, and ex-soldiers, the Gladiator games were one of Rome's most brutal and vibrant live events. Gladiators would be held underground under the Coliseum until they would be called upon to spill the blood of both man and animal in sport. Fighters would be matched based on their size, previous record, skill level, style of fighting, and years of experience, just like the professional contact sports today. Fighting out of the red corner at 195 pounds, the reigning victor, Spartacus! Oh, you're Spartacus? Oh, sorry. No, you're Spartacus. Okay. But it wasn't all thumbs down for these fighters. Gladiators were the celebrities of their time. Yeah, you can take that. There you go. Okay, one. We'll do one. Some gladiators even fought years after earning their freedom. Those years did not seem to be that long, with the average lifespan of the gladiator, though, living just to their mid-20s. I mean, it's pretty physical. The event was not just to kill your opponent. In fact, months of training and preparation was had. There was more of a spectacle of sportsmanship then, most of the time wounding their enemy, which would lead to the slow demise of a fighter, usually ranging between anywhere from 8 to 10 fights in their whole career. Come on, dude. 50,000 people cheering you on at the Yankee Stadium? Kyle! Oh, no!
And finally, number 1, fast food. Imagine getting a Happy Meal in 45 BC. You just get a toy of like Spartacus, just Yeah, that's nice, I'll put it on the window. Romans were indulging in fast food before the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 BC. They were having a good time until they weren't. Archaeologists recently excavated a thermopolium in the ruins of what was once thriving city of Pompeii. We found a snack bar in 2019 and it's since been reopened. Yeah, you can now pick up shifts once again at this restaurant that was open thousands of years ago. As of last August, the restaurant, located at the intersection of Silver Wedding Street and Alley of Balconies, they would serve pork, snails, beef, fish, you name it, and the corner also doubled down and crushed fava beans, more often than not mixing them with wine. So it was a good time, it was social. This was bumping on a Saturday night. The closest thing we have to ancient restaurants in Canada now is like coffee time. I don't know, every coffee time in Canada looks like it was damaged by Mount Vesuvius. Looks abandoned. The walls are broken in, nobody's working. I'm like, can I get a coffee? Hi, hello?
Number 10, Sumer. The Sumerians were the oldest known civilization in Mesopotamia. They created the first cities, and a large part of their success and the success of the Mesopotamians in general was due to the invention of irrigation. The land around the Tigris and Euphrates was not so great. It was fertile but prone to flooding pretty often. The solution was to divert water from canals into irrigation ditches. The Mesopotamians realized that the water supply from rivers was unreliable, so they dug a maze of ditches from the rivers to their fields. This created a reliable water source for farming. The crops fed the population, and farmers were able to trade the excess produce such as onions, garlic, apples, figs, grapes, and pomegranates. That's how the Mesopotamians really flourished.
Number 9, Hammurabi's Law. Law students and those taking the bar, rejoice, because I am talking about Hammurabi's Code. When folks were flocking into cities for the first time, the crime rate would have been something to take note of. Yeah. King Hammurabi made his code of laws, 282 to be exact, to give justice to all. Like in the commercial sector, for example, for those who steal. The principle of an eye for an eye, to make the punishment fit the crime. If you were caught stealing, then perhaps the removal of your arm that stole shall be an acceptable response. Now look, I'm not out here defending crooks. Don't steal, it's bad. But these laws, a little too cruel for me. I'd go through all of them, but well, you need to get back to your bar exam, so good luck out there, folks. I know you can do it.
Number 8, Great Death Pit. If you were a Sumer king, you likely professed yourself a god and/or a superhuman demigod. As such, your followers and members of court were required to treat you as such, with a level of devotion Andrew saves only for his collection of empty drink bottles he keeps at his desk. Can you please clean that up?
Hey!
What I'm sure Andrew doesn't expect from those empty bottles is that when he bites the dust, they too must do the same to accompany him to the afterlife. Sumerian kings absolutely did. The biggest example of this ritualistic offing would be the Great Pit of Delifing, discovered in 1922, which was the resting place of approximately 1,800 people, all of which served different kings and queens in the Sumerian capital city of Ur. Some of these followers may have been poisoned, others had a less than ceremonious demise as they had prominent holes in what should be rather intact parts of their skulls.
Number 7, Hanging Gardens. Here's a quote from Greek philosopher Strabo. The ascent to the highest stories by stairs, and at their side are water engines, by means of which persons appointed expressly for the purpose, and are continually employed in raising water from the Euphrates into the garden. Namaste. Yes, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon! I said it twice, oh my goodness, must be kinda cool. What a magnificent sight it must have been, a magnificent construction of beauty. Even predating the pyramids of Giza by a rough estimate of 5,000 years. We'll get to that later. Trouble is, this one is kind of a gray area. Here's the later. It could be completely made up by Strabo and others like him, or it could have been destroyed, as there are some depictions of a garden existing in a grand palace on the river Tigris near modern-day Mosul, but we're just not sure. We're not exactly sure. So, beautiful gardens, I hope they were there.
Number 6, the Acadian Empire. You know you're a big deal when it hasn't been done before you. The Acadian Empire was literally the first ever empire. They were around for about 100 years and first came to be around 4,300 years ago. And they were big on improving roads and irrigation. Only problem is that irrigation doesn't really help you out much when it stops raining for 290 years. The large southern part of the empire was pretty dependent on the northern part for most, or more like all, of its crops and food. So when a drought struck and took away the food, a panicking northern population went to seek help from their southern brethren, who, in return for all the years of food, put up walls to keep them out. Boom, an inciting incident for a violent conflict that brings down an empire. It's that simple, kiddos.
Number 5, the Gentleman's Tablet. Hey, at the end of the day, we're only human, and sometimes we do as they do on the Discovery Channel. We wouldn't be here if the people of ancient times did not put on a little Marvin Gaye and just feel the groove, baby. Well, strangely enough, not much has changed since then, and that includes our own curiosity with each other's gabagool. My generation has OnlyFans, the last generation had Playboy and Penthouse, and maybe the Martha Stewart magazine. That woman can do no wrong. Well, folks, in ancient Mesopotamia, they needed their fix too. Playboy was a few thousand years away, so the next best thing was these clay tablets depicting actions that my editors are wondering how they're even gonna show you. This ain't junior high health class. Y'all know how this works. So did the ancients. It's why there's a few of these tablets floating around and, in different positions, taking bricked up to a whole new level.
Number 4, a pillar of flesh. Another empire that rose to prominence in Mesopotamia would be the Assyrian Empire. And the kings here were pretty damn awful. They ruled with bloody iron fists of torture and mass life-ending escapades. One such king, Ashurnasirpal II, inherited a huge, strong army from his father, and using it, he would destroy pretty much anyone who didn't like him in ways that may have left his soldiers with PTSD. Like actually. He burned, blinded, and removed the craniums of rebels, set maidens on fire, and condemned opposing soldiers to die of dehydration in the desert. But I think what may be the worst way he dealt with those who opposed him would be when he flayed all the chiefs who had revolted and built a pillar that he covered with their skin. Hey, I think I feel my lunch coming back up. Andrew, get in here. No.
Number 3, Sumerian suds. If you're like me, then you love a good beer. Frankly, I could drink them ice cold or warm, just like our friends across the pond. Cheers, how are you doing? I'm doing great, thanks for asking. With that being said, I could never enjoy my Canadian lifestyle if it weren't for the Sumerians, as they may have invented the first beer. No more drunk hockey fights, no more cotty weekends in the Muskokas, and no more just sending her buddy. You gotta send her. Being the agricultural revolutionaries that they were, it makes sense that they would discover the fermentation process of wheat. Tablets found in excavations depict people drinking out of large jars that are speculated to be filled with a gorgeous 3.5% brew, which if you ask me, is the best way to enjoy said beverage, with friends around you in a big jar.
Number 2, Gilgamesh. Even if you don't know who it is, it's likely you have heard the name Gilgamesh. In Mesopotamia, Gilgamesh was the hero of Uruk, just like how Big Ched is the hero of my dreams. And in said city, stone tablets and even the art on walls tell his stories and legends. That's Gilgamesh, not Andrew. According to the stories, his mother was thought to be the goddess Ninsun, and his father was, give me a sec here, Lugalbanda, the god king of Uruk. And apparently, this half-man, half-god was the ruler of the city for 126 years, which would be completely insane if it were actually true. It could be, we don't actually know. The second half of the epic poem of Gilgamesh is all about him trying to figure out the meaning of life. And buddy, I mean, same here. We're all just dust in the wind, dude. Dust in the wind.
Number 1, the wheel, the cradle of civilization. There's a lot that happens in Mesopotamia, and Adam and I would need a whole history class to tell you everything that was happening in the Middle East. Maybe one day we'll actually teach a class, who knows? Yeah, maybe that'd be a good idea. Yeah. But one thing I can tell you is that thanks to ancient Sumerians, we have wheels. Maybe it was a pottery wheel. Maybe it was for a carriage. Maybe it was because we just like to make stuff. I don't know, but I don't think I need to tell you how important wheels are and how they literally reinvented the wheel. It was extremely revolutionary. Boats, floats, doors, stores, drawers, planes, trains, cars, Mars if you count the rover, bikes, flour mills, gears, cogs, clocks, and your 11th grade best friend Buddy. He was wheeling and dealing.
Kicking off the list at number 10, the first zoo. Long before the pyramids were even built, Egyptians were getting quite creative. They were the first to see a petting zoo. How brave is that, if anything? Yeah, let's just start touching animals and then see what happens. Let's do it. 6,000 years ago, Hierakonpolis was the capital of Upper Egypt during the pre-dynastic period. It was beautiful. It was sitting alongside the Nile River, which was even more beautiful back then, you can't even imagine. And in those days, perhaps the best way to flaunt your wealth was by getting an exotic pet. Yeah, the old Mike Tyson trick. There were excavations done back in the the late 19th century by English archaeologists James Quibble and Frederick Green, and they discovered that this town was once thriving with over 10,000 residents. It's a lot of people. It's a lot more people than we ever thought. That alone is amazing. That's a historical feat. But when further studies were performed, they also found the remains of an elephant surrounded in cosmetics, surrounded in ivory bracelets and amethyst beads, the whole glorious, you name it. A worshipped elephant. That's odd. Then they found the remains of cats and dogs, also worshipped. The dogs slightly more worshipped. Common pets, some crocodiles, again, brave owners there. There's also hippos, leopards, wild ox. It was a wild time. They were carefully buried, but the broken bones suggested a cruel history sometimes. But most of the times, they were pets. Not as bad as we thought there. I'm like, oh, ancient pets? No, they're good. A lot of ivory. Number 9, King Tut's passing. Perhaps one of the greatest mysteries is of course the history of the young King Tut. Younger than we remember, honestly. The young boy became pharaoh at just age 9 in 1332 BC. Yeah, what were you doing at age 9? I was mini golfing. Maybe. I don't even know. During his time ruling, the young king had to face a country in conflict. Egypt and Nubia at this point were going head to head over land, and not even 10 years into ruling, the young pharaoh passed away at age 18. It wasn't until 1922 until he was ever seen again. That's when Howard Carter, of course, discovered the tomb of the lost king, appropriately in the Valley of the Kings. This is where we could have been more careful, historically, because when Tut was discovered, they tried to move his body out of the oil that coated the coffin. But in doing so, they got a little bit too excited. They didn't really know what they were doing back then, so they damaged him. Yeah, they damaged an ancient king. How brutal is that? So now it's next to impossible to tell what really took his life at such an early age, especially for a king. We have some ideas though, it's not entirely hopeless at this point. It was believed King Tut, after some 3D scans were done, had a broken leg, so he may have fallen off a chariot or something. So if King Tut passed at an early age, out of nowhere, hopefully this was the reason why, or else there's another mystery afoot. Number 8, the first peace treaty. The first peace treaty in history ever was back in 1259 BC. Now at this point, ancient Egyptians and the Hittite Empire were fighting over what's now modern day Syria. This conflict had been lasting for centuries, and finally, come 1274 BC, the Battle of Kadesh was now underway. Of course, there was tons of bloodshed, no clear victor in sight, so what's left to do at this point? For the first time ever, a peace treaty was agreed upon. Ramses II and King Hattusili III both negotiated a peace treaty where both sides would aid each other if perhaps a third party decided to get involved. They saw their resources, they saw that they were lacking on both sides, so like, hey, we have no shot really, let's just team up. A copy of the treaty can now be found in New York above the entrance to the United Nations Security Council chamber. It's also in the Guinness Book of World Records as the oldest peace treaty ever. That's how you know it's official, if you don't believe me. Every 90s kid watching right now is like, oh, really? Amen. That's a fact. That's a true fact right there. Those holographic covers. What a trip. Number 7, board games. I love board games a lot, even Monopoly. I have the patience for it every now and then. But ancient Egyptians, talk about patience, my friends. They also loved board games. They created them. They got that board from time to time. Dogs and Jackals, Mehen and Senet, and 20 Squares, those are the classics. Mehen was played during the pre-dynastic period, around 2500 BC. Now the goal was to reach the center of the spiral, so we think, we're trying to piece it together. The board was a coiled snake almost, pretty creative. Senet was the most popular game of all time. Queen and kings alike would play this one. Senet had a long board with 30 squares painted on it. Now of course the rules are still unknown, still heavily debated, just like Monopoly even today. But we have some ideas how Egyptians played it. 3 rows of 10 squares, the last 5 are decorated, so it's assumed, like everything else in ancient Egypt, that this was themed on the afterlife. Plus, King Tut was buried with one of these boards. I'm gonna be buried with a GameCube or something like that. There's also some paintings of Queen Nefertiti playing Senet, so that's how you know it's a good one. It looks a lot like chess. Imagine playing a pharaoh in chess. God, I'd be so anxious. I'd be so nerve-wracking. I wouldn't even play checkers with a pharaoh. That'd be too scary. I'm bad at checkers and chess. I don't know how to play chess. I'm lying to you guys. I've never played chess. I don't know how to. Number 6, Akhenaten. This queen was ruling during the 18th dynasty of Egypt. The pharaoh Akhenaten, well, this was his daughter. She followed in her father's footsteps and was a great ruler, but she was also the wife and half-brother of one King Tut. A pretty conflicted spot to be in historically. Her and King Tut had the same father, but their mothers were different. Now after Tut's death, however, it's believed this queen may have married the pharaoh Ai shortly after, and perhaps she's buried near him right now in the Valley of the Kings. Back in 2010, DNA testing was being done in tomb KB21, and there were 2 18th dynasty queens that were recovered from that tomb in the Valley of the Kings. Could it be? Perhaps? There wasn't enough data that was found from the mummy, but they do know that the DNA is somewhat of an 18th dynasty royal bloodline, so we're definitely close. In another tomb KB63, numerous coffins were found, and one had an imprint of a woman on it, along with jewelry, women's clothing at the time, but the biggest clue really at this point was pottery fragments. Of course, it's always in the pottery. We've all played Ocarina of Time, always check the pots. The name Potton was on one of these pottery fragments. That's another clue. The only person to ever use this name historically was the long lost queen of Akhenaten. So now we're getting real close, dangerously close. But it feels weird to watch so many tombs be opened up at this point. Like, yeah, we're getting close to finding out things historically, but can we just leave these leading ladies alone? I feel like they dealt with enough men in their lifetime. Now we're just like, we're like, hey, is that her? Nope, we're good. It's like, let them rest. They have fake doors. They don't want us coming in. Number 5. Queen Nefertiti's disappearance. Ruling alongside the pharaoh Akhenaten from 1353 to 1336 BC, Queen Nefertiti, aka Lady of Grace, aka Hereditary Princess, was born in 1370 BC. She was born in the Egyptian city of Thebes. She was only 15 years old when she married 16-year-old Akhenaten. Again, always so young and just forced. This family forced fun. She worshipped the sun god Aten at the time, and alongside her young husband, she built a new capital called Amarna. She even created a new religion. She was onto some good stuff. She ruled over what's now considered the wealthiest period in Egyptian history. Nefertiti had 6 children, which were all daughters. Many believe this has something to do with her disappearance. After reconstructing Egypt's religious and political structure, soaring to new heights as a woman in the Egyptian court, the queen just vanished. Yeah, historically, just like that, boom. During the 12th year of the 17 that her husband ruled for, historical records seem to have just wiped out the queen's side of the legacy. She was gone from everything, and many believe that she didn't actually die, but rather, she disguised herself and continued to rule. See, the next in line after Akhenaten's reign was Pharaoh Smenkhkare. Was that really Nefertiti in disguise? I hope so. That's like some she's the man stuff right there. The reason we believe she may have disguised herself as a man is because of the female pharaoh, Hatshepsut. She ruled with a fake beard in the 15th century, so it's possible, we've seen it. And lastly, there's a theory that the reason Nefertiti was banished was because she couldn't produce a male heir. Like I mentioned, she had 6 daughters and then she disappeared. This is ancient history we're talking about. Always brutal, no matter what. Beautiful, but brutal. Number 4, Cleopatra's. Sure, she may have been born in Egypt, but Cleopatra, despite what many believe, was not Egyptian. She was the last Greek ruler of Egypt, and after Alexander the Great's death in 323 BC, Ptolemy then took over Egypt, which in turn launched this wave, this dynasty of Greek rulers that lasted for centuries. DNA-wise, she was barely Egyptian, but as she grew up, she was determined to learn all about Egyptian culture. And due to political structure, she started to style herself after the goddess Isis. She was the first Cleopatra that claimed to be Isis after the 3rd Cleopatra. Yeah, there's way more than we think. There's like 7. Number 3, King Ramses VIII. The last son of Ramses III. He's the 7th pharaoh of the 20th dynasty. King Ramses VIII. Yeah, history is confusing with these numbers sometimes. I gotta tell you, I had to type that one out a few times. I was like 8, 3rd, carry the 8, 9, Ramses what? The lost king had the throne for a very short amount of time, and historians are trying to understand why that is. What exactly happened? What in the King Joffrey went wrong with King Ramses VIII here? He was the only pharaoh of the 20th dynasty whose tomb is still lost in the Valley of the Kings, so maybe it's not even there. And the thing is, with his ruling being so short, the theory out there is that the tomb of KB19 that belonged to the son of Ramses IX, many believe this tomb was originally built for Ramses VIII. But once he became king, everybody saw his true colors. They must have changed their mind at that point, or changed their lane or something. They were like, maybe not him, you know? There is a confirmed tomb that was never used for Ramses VIII, and that was tomb QV43. That was in the Valley of the Queens. It was made for him, but never used. Again, more mysteries. The poor souls who had to build all these tombs, and they're like, you don't need it? Okay. 57 years to make that tomb. You sure you don't need it? Okay. Number 2, Baboon police. Ancient Egyptians worshipped lots of animals. We mentioned that earlier. They had zoos and elephants surrounded in ivory, all that good stuff. At one point or another, you've heard about how cats were highly respected back then, worshipped. But they also worshipped other animals as well. Sorry, cat people. Other animals are fun, like baboons, believe it or not. They were pretty important pieces to this ancient Egyptian puzzle. Egyptians had tattoos of baboons all over them. This was before Hammurabi, you know, anyone monumental like that ever came around. The most famous piece of history that we have preserved is in the collections of the British Museum in London. There's a mummy on display and it looks a little slightly different than the rest. EA6736, fun name, but he was recovered from the Temple of Cones in Luxor, Egypt. This little man dates back to the New Kingdom period, so anywhere around 1550 BC to 10 BC. Yeah, he's quite old. Baboons would appear in art and religion all over ancient Egypt, and one of my favorite facts ever has to be that in ancient Egyptian times, pharaohs would train baboons to make arrests. Yeah, imagine stealing food and trying to run away, and then you look back and there's 4 baboons doing parkour behind you, telling you to stop resisting, hucking bananas at you. That's crazy. And number 1, false doors. Imagine searching for a lost Egyptian tomb your entire life, alright? Imagine you spent years of your life dedicating everything to this research, and you finally find this door, this ancient door, you find an entrance carved into the wall. This is it. What lies beyond? You try and carefully open it with a team of archaeologists, but it won't budge because it is a fake door, my friends. It is a false door. Yeah, you just got juked out from a guy 4,500 years ago. He's like, gotcha. Took long, we did it. False doors in ancient Egyptian tombs are very common. Ancient Egyptians believed that these false doors were a connection to the dead. How beautiful is that? And that is how spirits were able to travel from here to there, back and forth. See, most false doors can be found on the west wall because Egyptians believed the west to be the land of the dead. The west. That's the west? Which way? Which way is north? Your west, my east. How does that sound? There we go. Starting our list off at number 10, Lake Neos. We love talking about Pompeii. We can't get enough of it. I'm fascinated. They have a restaurant that's back and open now in Pompeii. It's crazy. Now that's quite the eruption. Historically, that's a bad one. That's pretty scary. But a recent eruption in 1986, well, we don't talk about this one enough. First of all, a limnic eruption is a rare event, so you can sleep not in fear tonight. It occurs when CO2 dissolved in deep water lakes suddenly erupts. Cause yeah, that can happen. Who knew that? That's why I don't like lakes. There you go, right there. These events have only been observed twice, the deadliest being Lake Neos in 1986. When a limnic eruption occurs, large clouds of CO2 form, which then all of a sudden descend and drop below the oxygen in the air, causing all living things in the vicinity to choke and not survive anymore. In this case, the cloud fell on nearby villages, ultimately causing the deaths of 1,700 people and 3,500 livestock. Number 9, the Spanish flu of 1918. The Spanish flu of 1918. Okay, yeah, this one's probably pretty good. Since we know a little something about plagues now in real life and toilet paper and stress, let's turn the clocks back 95 years when the Spanish flu entered the game. What was it like back then? The Spanish flu, if you didn't know, it was a strain of the H1N1 virus, which we all know as well. And when it hit, it took 50 to 100 million people. Very fast. 4% of the world's population gone. Now, it was recent and it was quite horrible. We couldn't stay home and watch Ozark for that one, so instead, the Spanish flu is said to have spread so violently because of soldiers being in close quarters during World War I. Yeah, again, very different than our plague. Immune systems were shot as is, and you're telling me a plague rolled through while we're in trenches? No way, what a nightmare. But just like that, the virus disappeared. Better treatment, perhaps it mutated into a much weaker strain. Either way, great, stay gone. Get out of here. Go away and stay there, pal. Hit that thumbs up for the Spanish flu not being around. Awesome, we love that. It's a good one to not have. Number 8, the Great Dying. This name's pretty accurate if I'm being honest myself. Scariest environment imaginable. Here we go. Turning the clocks and solar system back 252 million years ago, the Permian Triassic extinction, which for convenience sake we'll call the Great Dying, was and hopefully shall remain the largest extinction event on Earth. The fact that we're even alive right now, watching this video, clicking that thumbs up and subscribing, well, it's all pretty rare, all things considered. This was a butterfly effect triggered by a massive volcanic eruption around the Serbian Traps in Russia. A runaway greenhouse effect was responsible for the loss of 95% of all marine life and 70% of all land animals. So everything, pretty much everything's gone. Temperatures rose as the sea began to absorb large quantities of CO2 from the atmosphere. Mentioned that a little earlier, and that could not be great. And it began turning into carbonic acid, hence all that marine life that didn't make it. Methane hydrate then started to bubble from the ocean surface, which is horrifying to imagine, and it raised the temperature even higher at that point. Now, imagine if this didn't happen. We'd have those scary sharks still swimming around. We're remnants of the surviving 4% of the Great Dying. Yeah, tell all your friends that. I'm gonna add that to my LinkedIn. That sounds not half bad. Yeah, I survived the Great Dying, so yeah. Really good at scooping ice cream. Let's do it. Number 7, Maximilien Robespierre. On July 27th, 1794, French revolutionary Maximilien Robespierre and 21 of his followers were all arrested at the Hotel de Ville in Paris. Now, considering that this was 1794 and we got arrested, what follows is sure to be a public nightmare. The next day, Robespierre and again 21 of his followers were all taken to the Place de Revolution, where they were all executed by guillotine before a cheering crowd. Always a cheering crowd, of course. What else are we doing today? Let's go watch. What history tends to leave out of this part is that Maximilian attempted to take his own life beforehand because he knew his fate was gonna suck with the whole thing. But when he tried to take his own life, he survived and was left instead with a nasty jaw wound. So in Game of Thrones fashion, the executioner, when the time came, ripped the jaw bandage off first, and then he saw the guillotine. Yeah, again, to a cheering crowd, remember? They all watched all of this unfold. I can't even watch UFC sometimes. You're telling me people watch this? IRL? I'm gonna go throw up real quick. Be right back. Number 6. The eruption. Mount Pinatubo, which is located in the Philippines, was another volcanic eruption that shook up history. A little more recent than the other one. This was on June 15th, 1991. Mount Pinatubo, this massive volcano, erupted into what would be the second largest volcanic eruption of the 20th century. Impressive? Yes. Terrifying? Absolutely. Yep, this is very loud and scary. Activity in the volcano first started on April 2nd, 1991, and these things take a little time to, finish up. So that same year, researchers set up seismographs in the area, and by June, the volcano was having a group of progressively shallower eruptions. And then on June 12th, the volcano had its first spectacular eruption, which sent hot ash 19 kilometers up into the atmosphere, which then rained on down to everything around it, which is the worst thing I can imagine. Additional smaller eruptions continued on June 13th, which then led to some intense seismic activity. And then on June 15th, the volcano once again went off, this time sending a cloud of ash 40 kilometers into the atmosphere. So bye-bye sun for a little bit. This one's gonna linger. Number 5, the Challenger crew. This is a photo that was taken of clearly the very excited Challenger crew right before when they were walking down the ramp ready to head off on their mission. Now, this photo is chilling, but it's nice to see them happy and together. The crew even included, at the time, 37-year-old Kristen McAuliffe, who was a high school social studies teacher. You may remember this, but your parents definitely do. See, she had won a spot on the mission through a program with NASA called the Teacher in Space program, and she had trained diligently for months in order to be the first ever non-military individual in space. On January 28th, 1986, the Challenger mission proved to be faithful just 73 seconds after liftoff. See, 2 rubber O-rings failed because of the cold temperatures that morning, and on live television, the world had to watch as the spacecraft broke apart and then fell into the ocean, sadly taking the lives of everybody on board the craft. Now, I'm not sure if you've watched the documentary on Netflix, but it's a mini-series about this whole thing and it's powerful stuff. It's really emotional. I just finished it and it's moving. Number 4, the core. This photo shows a physicist named Harold Agnew, and while this photo looks relatively normal and scientific or whatever, a non-threatening photo, what he has in his hands is truly devastating. It changed history. Harold is holding the nuclear core of what was nicknamed the Fat Man. Yeah, that thing. This means that Harold is now holding the nuclear core of the atomic weapon that was later dropped on Nagasaki in 1945. The immediate blast took many lives, as well as the long-term effects of radiation illnesses. Now, it's crazy to look at a photo like this because it seems so perfectly normal when he literally has a life-changing, world-ending device in the palm of his hand, like a literal supervillain holding kryptonite. I couldn't imagine seeing that, let alone holding it. No way. My grandmother wouldn't even hold me as a baby because I was too small and fragile. Think she'd hold this? No way. Butterfingers. Butterfingers galore over there. Number 3, the Ball of Burning Men. January 28th, 1393. You are formally invited to a masquerade ball. How fun is that? Who is it under that mask? Oh, it's just Taylor on Bumblebee. Love him. He's great. The French Queen Isabeau of Bavaria is now hosting one of the most lavish parties of the decade, right? So bring your finest and longest krakows. Roll it in style. Now, when the French royal court was celebrating the marriage of one of the Queen's ladies in waiting, it of course was a big deal. It's fun. It's a big happy day. For some, the best days of their lives. For others at this ball, not so great. Probably the last days of their lives. King Charles VI had 5 companions perform a dance or a theater routine of sorts. Now, they did a performance as beasts. They were committed to the bit, right? They had these big, lovely masks, big baggy outfits, lots of linen, lots of stuffing to appear as if they were real beasts. Now, the party was going well, wine was spilling, people were laughing, beasts were roaring, we were committed, but one rule beforehand was put into place before the party started. Absolutely, positively, no open flames. Obviously, right? I mean, look at that guy. He looks like a couch. We're not gonna put a match near him. It's gonna be chaos. The Duke of Orleans had a little too much fun prior to this event, and he forgot the first rule of Fight Club when he arrived. The guy walked in, with a lit torch. He wanted to see everyone. Some accounts say he dropped the torch by accident. Others say he got too close trying to guess the identity of said beasts. Either way, this tragic event took the lives of 4 people, hence the name Ball of the Burning Men. That's terrible, imagine that, what a gig. Number 2, the Stanford Prison Experiment. One of the most well-known experiments of all time was the Stanford Prison Experiment. It was an attempt to investigate the psychological effects of perceived power, and it worked. A little too well, I'd say. Guards and prisoners were all chosen randomly, from college students to anyone, your neighbor. You had no idea. Nobody really knew just how bad this experiment would end up, so anyone volunteered. Those in power were taking it to an extreme level. It was absolute psychological distress. Some of the prisoners went insane. The whole exercise was abandoned after only 6 days, which is not a short amount of time, but historians say just 6 days because it was intended to last much longer. Now, it's shocking to see the lengths people go after receiving power over another human being. I thought I was evil unplugging my brother's controller and like playing, you know, and he wasn't plugged in. This is like next level. And finally, number 1, mummified pets. Are you a pet owner? If so, comment down below which animals fill your house. We love that. Olivia and I want to get a dog so bad. I was always a dog guy growing up. My aunt had 3 pugs. It was the dream. I love it. Ancient Egyptians, they fancied a house pet or two. We know this. But Egyptians saw animals as incarnations of the gods, which I do too with my Shih Tzu, of course. The very concept of having a pet came from ancient Egyptians, so thank you. Egyptians were of course fans of cats. That's common knowledge at this point. But did you know they also had the same idea for hawks, lions, dogs, and baboons? Yeah, baboons. That's amazing. Go ask your parents for a baboon as a pet. There you go. I thought dogs doing their business inside was annoying, but a lion? Your arm's gonna be tired scooping that one up. Many of these animals were often mummified and buried with their owners after they'd passed, just like how many owners today cremate their pets. I mean, I'm not sure I would mummify a Shih Tzu, but hey, whatever floats your boat, who am I to judge? Other creatures were specially trained to work as helper animals back then. So ancient Egyptian police officers would use dogs and monkeys to help patrolling. Then they'd mummify them. What a time, imagine that.
Number 10, stone toilet paper. It's been said that only 2 things in life are certain: not living and taxes. However, I think a third point needs to be added, and that's everybody goes number 2. It's a part of life. You eat, your body takes in its nutrients, and then it gets rid of the waste. That's the cycle of life. It's kind of beautiful, actually. Then we all have to use an invention that I know we're all thankful for: toilet paper. But have you ever wondered what people of ancient times did? I know I do. After all, there was no Walmartius to purchase Greco Papyrus Rolleus, or the Greek staple that is olive oil. Trust me, that'll come into play later. Well, the answer, my friend, is very simple. Even simpler than the 3 seashells, and everybody knows how to use them. Cleansing stones. Yes, that's right. Smooth, rounded stones, just for the occasion. My mom always joked around about using newspapers like some folks did in the old days, but stones, they actually use stones to do that part. A little too rough for my Gerber baby bottom, if you will. No thank you. No. Mom, I was a Gerber baby. Number 9, beef up. Gotta get the gains, gotta get swole so your Discord crush will send you the heart emojis and ooh-oohs that you so desire. I'm sorry, that's so cringe, I'm so sorry. At least that's how I'm told romance works these days. Romance might have changed, but working out has not. The ancient Greeks worked out to maintain a peak athletic performance. That's right, brother. However, it wasn't exactly treadmills and pumping iron. One Greek athlete's training involved carrying a cow calf around all day until the calf reached adulthood. Pretty cool. This is all done naked, by the way, though, and slathered in olive oil. Not so cool. Athletes also ate their fair share to keep up with all the working out they did. Some cases up to 10 pounds of meat and bread a day. Talk about beefy boys. That's right, brother. Number 8, painted statues. When you close your eyes and think of ancient Greece, what do you imagine? Oh yes, I'm just imagining it right now. Beautiful coastline cities with harbors bustling full of ships carrying fresh fish and cargo, men and women flocking the brick streets and markets. White marble monuments surround the city like clouds of opulence, and the statues of pure white marble depicting Greek gods and myths of yonder. Sounds great, right? Well, what if I told you that not all these beautiful white statues that you could see in museums were pure white marble as we know them today? Yes, that's right. Greek marble statues had color. They were painted with the best and brightest colors they had at the time. It's only with time that the color has faded. Some people want to repaint only after a few short years. Try a couple thousand. Number 7, tasteful doctor. As humans today, we have a lot of knowledge in the medical field, and we're only getting smarter. Who knows what we'll be capable of in 100 years? Kind of amazing to think about. Well, despite the technology that the Greeks did not possess, any college professor today will tell you that they were not stupid. They weren't. We owe a lot to them. Part of that is in the medical field. For example, urine tests. A lot can be told about a person from their urine. The Greeks knew this, but they didn't have all that fancy schmancy machines to tell them what was in their urine. Instead, they did the next best thing and tasted the forbidden lemonade in order to determine what was wrong with the patient. Sure, you can tell a lot by that way too, but if the person was sick, well, you know how that goes. Let's keep the lemonade in the cups, please. Yes, I believe. Yes, you have something wrong with your liver. Number 6, one night sneeze. We've all been there. It was a hot summer night. You went out with a couple of friends for girls' night. Tonight is all about the ladies. No guys, you say to each other. And now you're in the club and drinks are flowing. And that's when you see him. He's tall, handsome, and has blue eyes. You're smitten. Hours later, you find yourself under the sheets up to the neck like it's a primetime sitcom. The sun peers its way through curtains that haven't been cleaned since he bought them. And yes, that's right. That's a one-night stand. They happen, and sometimes people just want to have a little fun. Can you blame them? I can't. What I'm getting at is sometimes nights like those can have an 18-year investment after a 9-month down payment, if you catch my drift. The ancient Greeks had a simple solution for ladies who weren't interested in that kind of bargain. Sneeze. Yes, sneeze. Achoo! Sneeze. Sneeze away the night of Cinco de Mayo tequila shots at a bar called O'Grady's. The Greeks believed if you sneezed a whole bunch, you couldn't get preggers. Simple. Just simple. All you can do is sneeze, dude. Simple. Number 5, athlete juice. Speaking of gross, this one is straight out of Johnny Knoxville's playbook. Shout out to those guys. I hope one day I'm cool enough and famous enough to meet them. Maybe do a bit. Chetty's not gonna fud, so I'm down. Anyway, back to the Greeks. Remember when I said the Greek bodybuilders like to oil up? Well, so did the athletes. Here's where it gets gross. After days of events and running around in the dirt, naked with olive oil, these athletes wouldn't always bathe. But why? Well, the answer is marketing. Just like Gatorade commercials of the early 2000s, these athletes were covered in juice. This sludge was scraped off in what I'm sure was a very humanizing experience and jarred up to be sold like a superhero serum for the average Joe Schmo to drink or rub on themselves. This mixture was called gloios. No thank you. I will pass. Number 4, Nocturn Toten. It was 2008. I was alone in the dark one summer night. There, illuminating my poor innocent face, was Call of Duty World at War, the latest action-packed Hollywood blockbuster FPS from Activision. Now, I always finish campaigns first before moving on to multiplayer. Just when I thought it was over, a new cutscene started playing, except this one was different. It was dark, and the camera was shaky. And that's when I saw them, twisted and screeching undead, sprinting at me. I have never turned off a console so fast in all my life. Well, it seems the ancient Greeks shared this fear as well. To prevent zombies eating their very smart brains, the Greeks oftentimes buried folks with heavy stuff on top of them, just to prevent them from climbing out of their graves. That's the smartest people on earth, and they think the zombies are gonna come get them. That's crazy. Guys, come on. Number 3, diluted wine. The Greeks were well known for their artisan goods and foods. Their wine is no different. Some good stuff out there. However, did you know that Greeks would dilute their wine with a little H2O? Drinking wine pure was sometimes considered to be an unholy act, as it was said it could make a man unruly. Well, they're not too far off from the truth on that one, actually. Drinking too much wine can make you go a little silly. So yeah, diluting it kind of makes sense. Sometimes during hot weather, if it was available, snow was added for a cool and refreshing drink on the hot Greek island days. It sounds kind of nice, kind of like an ice spritzer, a Greek ice wine spritzer. How nice, wow. Number 2, the finger. The ultimate hand gesture. I know you're gonna have to blur it out or not even put it in, but here we go. That's what I'm talking about. The ultimate hand gesture. It starts with a, hey, I'm walking here, and ends with a simple finger in the air. It's been used for centuries and will probably be used for many more. Ever wondered where the origins of the most powerful hand gesture besides Darth Vader's force choke come from? Well, the almighty gesture has its origins in ancient Greece. Who would have thought? While no one is 100% sure the exact origins of it, we know it was used back then and it was around. The very interesting Diogenes was known to use it against those passing by he was distasteful of. He didn't like a lot of people. Maybe it was because it was simple, phallic, or just kind of strange. But at the end of the day, we all know what it means. Number 1. Mud bath. I know Steve-O has literally done something like this before, and if there's rules you should write this one down, this second, right now, write it down. Be kind to one another, and work hard in life. And never do anything ever that Steve-O has ever done. Those are really good rules. Trust me, it's good words to live by. So what exactly am I talking about? Well, in ancient Greece, for those who could afford it and had the time, they needed to relax. I need to relax. They needed the spa treatment. Heck, I've never even been to a spa. Someone take me. The ancient Greeks loved mud baths, and from what I hear, it's actually got quite a lot of benefits to it. However, the Greeks added one secret ingredient. One piece of the Krabby Patty formula I know most of us would say no to, even Plankton. Crocodile dung. Oh god. Yes, that's right. They bathed in hot crocodile refuse. It's great for the skin, apparently. So much so, it was thought it had beautifying and restorative properties. Go ahead then. Jump right in, guys. Water's fine. Come on in.